Welcome, weary traveler of the modern world. Tonight we invite you to step away from the hurried pace of contemporary life and drift backward through the corridors of time. Let the weight of today's concerns fall from your shoulders as we journey together to a world both magnificent and treacherous, the Byzantine Empire at its zenith. Imagine yourself leaving behind the familiar comforts of your present surroundings. Feel the transition as we move through centuries, past the Renaissance masters and medieval knights, beyond the Viking raids in Charlemagne's court, until we arrive at the jewel of the medieval world, Constantinople, the city that was once New Rome. Here, where Europe meets Asia across the shimmering waters of the Bosphorus, stood palaces of unimaginable splendor. Golden domes caught the morning light, while marble corridors echoed with whispered conspiracies and the rustle of silk robes. This was a world where a single glance from an emperor could elevate a peasant to nobility or condemn a noble to a gruesome death. Tonight, we will walk these hallowed and haunted halls together. We will breathe the perfumed air thick with incense and intrigue, witness ceremonies of breathtaking pageantry, and understand the daily terror that accompanied even the greatest privilege. The Byzantine palace was a paradox, a place of divine beauty where mortal dangers lurked behind every golden column. Let your breathing slow as we prepare to enter this world. The soft glow of oil lamps will guide our way as we discover what it truly meant to live, love, and survive in the shadow of the purple-born emperors. Rest comfortably now, and let the story unfold like the richest Byzantine tapestry, thread by golden thread. Picture yourself awakening before dawn in a small chamber somewhere within the labyrinthine Great Palace of Constantinople. The year might be 950 AD, and you are a mid-ranking court official, perhaps a Chartularios or a Protokentarchos, one of dozens of administrators who keep the vast machinery of empire functioning. Your small window faces east, and through it, you can see the first pale light creeping across the Golden Horn. But there is no time to appreciate the view. The moment consciousness returns, your stomach tightens with the familiar knot of anxiety that has become your constant companion. Today, like every day, you will navigate a world where a single misstep, a poorly chosen word, or even an unfortunate expression crossing your face at the wrong moment could spell your doom. Your day begins with the elaborate ritual of dress. Every garment, every ornament, every detail of your appearance must conform precisely to the complex hierarchies that govern court life. Your silk tunic bears the specific shade of purple-blue that indicates your rank. Wear a color too elevated for your station, and accusations of presumption will follow. Too humble, and you risk appearing to mock the emperor's generosity in elevating you to your position. The morning air in the palace corridors carries the mingled scents of frankincense from the palace chapel, rosewater from the imperial gardens, and something less pleasant, the underlying odor of fear that seems to permeate every corner of this magnificent prison. As you make your way through marble hallways adorned with mosaics depicting Christ and the saints blessing various emperors, you practice the elaborate prostrations you will soon perform. The proskynesis, the act of throwing yourself face down before the emperor, is not merely ceremonial. It is a daily reminder of your absolute subjugation. Imagine the cold marble pressed against your forehead as you lie prostrate, waiting for permission to rise. The silence stretches, and you wonder if today might be the day the emperor decides you have outlived your usefulness. Has someone whispered poison in his ear about your loyalty? Have your rivals presented evidence of some long-forgotten indiscretion? In the Byzantine court, paranoia is not a mental illness. It is a survival skill. You have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate shifts in imperial favor, the way certain officials avoid eye contact during morning ceremonies, The conspicuous absence of a colleague who was present just yesterday, the nervous energy that ripples through gatherings when news arrives from distant provinces or enemy territories. Your position requires you to attend the daily morning ceremony in the Chrysotriklinos, the golden reception hall that serves as the throne room. Here, beneath a dome decorated with a mosaic of Christ flanked by emperors, you will join hundreds of other officials in an elaborate dance of submission and sycophancy. The air grows thick with the breath of so many men pressed together, the rustle of silk robes creating a constant whispered soundtrack. When the emperor appears, and you never know precisely when this will happen, the entire assembly drops as one. The sound is distinctive. Hundreds of bodies hitting marble simultaneously like a sudden heavy rain. You press your face to the floor and wait, listening for the subtle audio cues that will tell you when to rise, when to step forward if summoned, when to retreat if you sense displeasure. The emperor himself is a distant figure, often appearing more as an icon than a man, draped in purple silk worked with golden thread, crowned with a diadem that catches and scatters light like captured stars. He exists in a sphere so elevated that direct conversation is virtually impossible. Communication flows through intermediaries, each layer adding its own interpretation and potential for fatal miscommunication. Consider the constant mental exhaustion of navigating court protocol. Every gesture has meaning. The way you hold your hands, the angle of your bow, the precise moment you speak or fall silent. All of these are scrutinized by rivals seeking advantage and by imperial observers whose job is to detect the slightest hint of disloyalty or presumption. You have memorized hundreds of rules, but new ones emerge constantly, and ignorance is never accepted as an excuse. Meals at court are exercises in anxiety. You sit according to strict precedents, and any confusion about your proper place can result in public humiliation or worse. The food itself is suspect. Poison has claimed numerous court officials over the years, and you have learned to eat sparingly and to watch carefully for signs of distress in those around you. The elaborate dishes, prepared by imperial cooks and served on golden plates, taste of little but fear. The palace eunuchs hold enormous power, and as a man with a family, you are automatically suspect in their eyes. These castrated courtiers, denied the possibility of founding dynasties, often serve as the emperor's most trusted advisors precisely because their loyalty cannot be divided by family ambitions. They watch you with calculating eyes, always seeking evidence of the familial loyalties that might compromise your absolute devotion to the empire. Your wife and children, if you have them, live in a state of perpetual uncertainty. They enjoy certain privileges, better housing, finer food, protection from common criminals, but they also serve as hostages to your good behavior. Imperial displeasure can extend far beyond the guilty party. Entire families have been known to disappear into dungeons beneath the palace or to be exiled to remote monasteries where they live out their days in prayer and regret. Sleep, when it comes, offers little respite. Your dreams are filled with images of purple-clad figures, golden ceremonies, and the ever-present possibility of discovery. Perhaps you have accepted a gift that could be construed as a bribe. Perhaps a comment you made months ago has been reported and misinterpreted. Perhaps your predecessor in this position fell from grace for reasons that were never made clear, and you worry that the same mysterious forces might soon turn their attention to you. The palace itself becomes a character in your daily drama. Its countless rooms and corridors hold secrets accumulated over centuries. You walk past chambers where previous emperors held court, past cells where fallen favorites once awaited execution, past gardens where imperial conspiracies were hatched under blooming rose bushes. The very walls seem to whisper warnings about the transience of favor and the permanence of imperial memory. Even your moments of apparent triumph are colored by anxiety. When the emperor shows you favor, perhaps by assigning you to a more prestigious position or by including you in a select ceremony, You understand that elevation in this world often precedes destruction. Many of history's most famous Byzantine court figures met their ends just as they seemed to reach the pinnacle of success. The weight of ceremony becomes a physical burden. Your knees ache from countless prostrations. Your back protests from hours spent in precisely controlled postures. Your throat grows dry from speaking only when spoken to, and then only in the prescribed formulas that court etiquette demands. You begin to forget what casual conversation feels like, what it means to express a genuine opinion or to laugh without calculation. As the day wears toward evening, you attend the final ceremonies, offer the final prostrations, navigate the final opportunities for fatal error. Return to your chamber brings only temporary relief, for tomorrow will bring the same elaborate dance of survival. The palace around you settles into its nighttime rhythms, guards changing shifts with muffled footsteps, oil lamps flickering in distant corridors, the ever-present sound of whispered conversations that might be planning your downfall or simply discussing the weather. In this world of unimaginable splendor, you have learned that beauty and terror are intimate companions. Every golden mosaic, every silk hanging, every precious ornament serves as a reminder of the empire's power and of how quickly that power can be turned against you. The purple-born emperors who rule this domain are revered as God's representatives on earth, but they are also mortals capable of extraordinary cruelty when they perceive threats to their divine authority. Rest now, as our Byzantine courtier finally closes his eyes, knowing that he will wake tomorrow to face the same elaborate trial of survival, the same magnificent prison of protocol and paranoia. The soft sound of his breathing mingles with the distant echoes of empire, a reminder that even in the most glorious civilizations, individual lives unfold in quiet desperation and enduring hope. As our court official sleeps fitfully in his modest chamber, let us drift through the palace corridors to explore a story that epitomizes the strange possibilities and terrible dangers of Byzantine court life. We journey now into the reign of Justinian the Great to witness the remarkable ascent of a woman who rose from the most humble origins to become one of history's most powerful empresses. Picture the Constantinople of 527 AD, a city humming with the energy of Justinian's ambitious dreams. The young emperor, barely 40, burns with visions of reconquering the lost western territories of Rome. But beside him sits a figure even more extraordinary, Theodora, a woman whose very presence on the imperial throne scandalized the traditional nobility and fascinated chroniclers for centuries to come. To understand Theodora's triumph, we must first imagine her beginnings in the raucous world of Constantinople's hippodrome. The year is perhaps 495 AD, and a small girl watches her father tend to the bears that will perform in the circus. The hippodrome stretches before her like a vast stone amphitheater capable of holding 100,000 spectators. The air thrums with anticipation, thick with the scents of sawdust, animal musk, and the sweat of thousands of packed bodies. Her father Acacius serves as a bear keeper for the Green faction, one of the two great circus parties that divide Constantinople's population with an intensity that rivals religious fervor. When he dies unexpectedly, young Theodora's world crumbles. Her mother, desperate to maintain the family's meager income, remarries quickly, hoping her new husband can claim Acacius's position. But the Green faction has already chosen another bear keeper, leaving the family destitute. Imagine Theodora as a child, watching her mother lead her and her sisters into the hippodrome's arena during a racing interval. The vast crowd falls silent as the three females prostrate themselves in the sand, begging the spectators' mercy. It is a moment of public humiliation that will burn in Theodora's memory forever. The Blue faction, rivals to the Greens, take pity and offer her stepfather employment. This act of charity creates a debt, that will echo through imperial history. As she grows into womanhood, Theodora enters the only profession available to women of her class and circumstances, the theatre. But Byzantine theatre is far from the refined entertainment we might imagine today. It is crude, sexual, and deeply scandalous. Actresses are barely distinguishable from prostitutes in the public mind, existing at the very bottom of social hierarchy, forbidden even from marrying into the senatorial class. Picture the young Theodora performing in the theatres and taverns of Constantinople's entertainment district. She develops a reputation for intelligence, wit, and striking beauty, but also for the kind of provocative performances that both titillate and shock audiences. The historian Procopius, writing years later with evident malice, describes performances so scandalous that even recounting them would be unseemly. Whether his accounts reflect truth or spite, they capture the social chasm that Theodora will eventually cross. But something changes in Theodora during these years. Perhaps it is the constant exposure to human nature at its most raw and desperate. Perhaps it is the bitter understanding of how society treats its most vulnerable members. She begins to demonstrate an unusual political intelligence, an ability to read the currents of power that flow beneath Constantinople's glittering surface. Her transformation accelerates when she meets Hetebulus, a provincial governor, departing for a posting in North Africa. She accompanies him as his mistress, trading the familiar dangers of Constantinople for the unknown perils of frontier administration. But the relationship sours quickly. Imagine Theodora, perhaps 20 years old, abandoned in Alexandria with no resources and no clear path home. The experience is devastating, but also formative. She learns that survival requires not just beauty or charm, but cunning and absolute self-reliance. The journey back to Constantinople transforms her further. She travels slowly, stopping in various cities around the eastern Mediterranean. In Antioch, she encounters Monophysite Christians whose theological views have been condemned as heretical by imperial authorities. Their persecution resonates with her own experience of marginalization, and she develops both religious convictions and political connections that will prove crucial in her later life. When she finally returns to Constantinople, Theodora has reinvented herself. She renounces her former profession, adopts a lifestyle of apparent piety, and supports herself through the humble occupation of spinning wool. But this modest exterior conceals a woman who has learned to navigate the treacherous currents of power with exceptional skill. It is during this period of apparent retirement that she encounters Justinian, then heir apparent to his uncle, Emperor Justin. The meeting itself is lost to history. Did they encounter each other at court, through mutual friends, in one of Constantinople's countless churches? What we know is that Justinian, a man of serious temperament and scholarly inclinations, becomes utterly captivated by this former actress turned ascetic. Their relationship scandalizes Constantinople society. Justinian is heir to the purple, nephew of the reigning emperor, a man whose bloodline traces back to peasant farmers in Macedonia, but who now stands at the pinnacle of earthly power. Theodora remains, in legal terms, an actress, a profession so degraded that imperial law specifically forbids such women from marrying senators, let alone imperial heirs. But Justinian's passion proves stronger than social convention. He persuades his uncle to change the law, creating a legal path for reformed actresses to marry into respectable society. The legislation is clearly crafted with one specific woman in mind. When Justin dies in 527 AD, Justinian ascends the throne with Theodora beside him as full co-ruler. Not merely an emperor's wife, but an empress wielding independent authority. Picture the coronation ceremony in the Hagia Sophia, that architectural marvel that Justinian will rebuild after its destruction in the coming riots. Theodora, draped in purple silk and crowned with a diadem of pearls and precious stones, receives the same acclamations as her husband. The former bearkeeper's daughter has achieved the impossible. She has transcended every barrier of class, profession, and gender that Byzantine society could construct. But power, once achieved, must be defended. The early years of their joint reign face constant challenges. The treasury struggles under the weight of Justinian's ambitious building projects and military campaigns. Religious controversies divide the empire's Christian population. Provincial governors resist Constantinople's authority. Most dangerously, the circus factions that once provided Theodora's family their livelihood now threaten to tear the empire apart. The crisis comes to a head in January 532 AD, in the events history remembers as the Nika riots. Picture Constantinople in the grip of revolution. The blue and green factions have temporarily united against Justinian's unpopular policies, particularly the harsh taxation necessary to fund his grandiose schemes. Their rallying cry of Nika, victory, echoes through streets where buildings burn and citizens flee in terror. For 5 days, the rioters control most of the capital. They proclaim a new emperor, storm government buildings, and reduce much of the city center to smoking ruins. In the Great Palace, Justinian's advisors urge immediate flight. Ships wait in the harbor to carry the imperial couple to safety in Anatolia, where they might regroup and perhaps eventually reclaim their throne. It is in this moment of ultimate crisis that Theodora reveals the steel beneath her silk robes. As Justinian wavers, paralyzed by the enormity of the disaster, his empress rises to address the assembled court. Her words, preserved by the historian Procopius, despite his general hostility toward her, ring across the centuries. "Purple makes the finest shroud," she declares, reminding all present that imperial dignity transcends mere survival. She speaks of the shame that would accompany flight, of the certainty that exile would mean a living death. Better to die as rulers than to live as refugees. Her speech transforms the mood in the council chamber, shaming the male advisors who had counseled retreat and stiffening Justinian's resolve to fight. But Theodora does more than inspire. She acts. While Justinian organizes the military response, she deploys her own network of agents and allies. Remember her debt to the Blue faction, who had aided her family decades earlier when the Greens rejected them? Now she exploits the temporary alliance between Blues and Greens, sending messengers to remind the Blue leadership of old loyalties and new opportunities. The details of her maneuvering remain shadowy. This was a world where the most important negotiations happened in whispered conversations and sealed letters. But the results speak for themselves. At the crucial moment, when the rioters have gathered in the hippodrome to acclaim their chosen emperor, the Blue faction suddenly switches sides. The unified opposition crumbles, allowing Justinian's general Belisarius to trap thousands of rebels in the circus where Theodora had once begged for mercy. The slaughter that follows is terrible, even by Byzantine standards. 30,000 people perish in the hippodrome, their blood soaking the same sands where Theodora's family had once prostrated themselves before an indifferent crowd. The irony is not lost on contemporary observers. The former actress has orchestrated the destruction of her enemies on the very stage where her own family's humiliation had played out decades earlier. In the aftermath of the Nika riots, Theodora's position as co-ruler becomes unassailable. She has proven herself not merely Justinian's beloved wife, but an essential partner in governance, possessing political skills that complement his legal and theological brilliance. Together, they rebuild Constantinople on an even grander scale, with the new Hagia Sophia as their crown jewel. But Theodora's power extends far beyond ceremonial roles. She maintains her own court, receives foreign ambassadors, and influences imperial policy on everything from religious doctrine to legal reform. Her background gives her a unique perspective on the empire's problems. She understands poverty, exploitation, and social marginalization in ways that her aristocratic colleagues cannot fathom. This understanding manifests in surprisingly progressive policies. She champions legal reforms that protect women from forced prostitution and make it easier for former prostitutes to reintegrate into respectable society. She establishes refuges for women fleeing abusive situations. When religious persecution threatens her beloved Monophysite Christians, she provides them sanctuary within the palace itself, creating a theological tension with her husband that persists throughout their reign. Picture Theodora in her later years, receiving petitioners in the palace's silk-draped reception chambers. A former prostitute seeks legal protection from an abusive pimp. A provincial governor's wife complains of her husband's cruelty. A group of Monophysite clergy request imperial intervention to prevent their persecution by orthodox bishops. In each case, they find in the Empress not just sympathy, but practical assistance backed by imperial authority. Yet power also corrupts, and Theodora proves as capable of cruelty as any ruler. When opponents threaten her interests, she responds with Byzantine ruthlessness. Rival court figures disappear into dungeons. Rebellious provincial officials find themselves stripped of position and property. Her agents operate throughout the empire, gathering intelligence and eliminating threats with quiet efficiency. The contradictions in her character mirror those of the empire itself, a civilization that produces sublime art and architecture while practicing systematic brutality, that venerates Christian virtues while rewarding political cunning, that proclaims justice while maintaining rigid social hierarchies. Theodora embodies these tensions perfectly. The devout Christian who orders assassinations, the former outcasts who shows no mercy to current rebels, the champion of women's rights who crushes political opposition without regard for gender. As we imagine her final years, picture an empress grown comfortable with absolute power. She holds court in chambers decorated with mosaics depicting her own image alongside Christ and the Virgin Mary, a visual statement of her semi-divine status that would have seemed impossible to the young girl who once begged for mercy in the Hippodrome. When she speaks, senators who can trace their lineages back centuries listen with careful attention, knowing that her words carry the full weight of imperial authority. Theodora dies in 548 AD, perhaps of cancer, leaving behind a grief-stricken Justinian who never remarries, and whose subsequent reign lacks the political brilliance of their partnership. Her funeral draws mourners from across the known world, testimony to a reign that transformed not just one woman's destiny, but the very nature of imperial power. In death, she achieves a final transformation, from the scandalous actress who shocked Constantinople society to the revered empress whose mosaics still gaze serenely from the walls of Ravenna's churches. Her story reminds us that in Byzantium, more than in perhaps any other civilization, the distance between degradation and deification could be crossed in a single lifetime by those with sufficient intelligence, courage, and ruthless determination. Rest now in the knowledge that even in history's most rigid hierarchies, extraordinary individuals could sometimes shatter the barriers that confined them, rising from the circus sawdust to the purple throne through a combination of talent, timing, and an absolute refusal to accept the limitations that society sought to impose upon them. As Theodora's legacy settles into the golden threads of imperial memory, let us drift deeper into the shadows of Byzantine mystery. Here, in the realm where history meets legend, we encounter secrets that died with their guardians and treasures that vanish beneath the weight of centuries. Tonight, we explore two of Byzantium's greatest enigmas: the terrifying weapon known as Greek fire and the archaeological puzzle of the Great Palace itself, a complex so vast and magnificent that even its ruins challenge our understanding. Picture yourself standing on the walls of Constantinople in the year 717 AD, as the greatest siege in the city's history unfolds below. The Arab fleet, hundreds of vessels strong, fills the Golden Horn like a forest of masts and sails. For nearly a year, these ships have maintained their blockade, slowly strangling the last great bastion of Christian resistance in the east. The city's granaries grow empty, its cisterns run low, and its defenders grow gaunt with hunger and fatigue. But the Byzantines possess a secret that their enemies have not yet fully comprehended. As darkness falls over the besieged city, strange preparations begin on the harbor walls. Teams of men position curious bronze tubes, their surfaces green with age and mystery. These siphons, as the Greeks call them, appear almost ornamental in the gathering dusk, like decorative fountains awaiting some imperial celebration. The liquid they contain, however, is anything but decorative. Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's most closely guarded secret, rests in carefully sealed containers, its composition known only to a handful of artificers whose families have guarded the formula for generations. Even now, 13 centuries later, the exact recipe remains one of history's great mysteries, lost in the chaos of Constantinople's final fall. Imagine the moment when the Byzantine defenders spring their trap. The Arab ships, confident in their numerical superiority, press closer to the walls under cover of darkness. Suddenly, streams of liquid fire arc through the night sky, brilliant orange tongues of flame that seem to burn the very air itself. Where this substance touches wood, canvas, or flesh, it clings with horrifying tenacity, continuing to burn even when doused with water. The chronicles describe scenes of indescribable terror as enemy vessels burst into flame like enormous torches. The fire spreads with supernatural speed, leaping from ship to ship as sailors leap screaming into waters that offer no refuge. For Greek fire burns upon the waves themselves, creating sheets of flame that turn the harbor into a vision of liquid hell. The screams of burning men echo off Constantinople's walls, a testament to human ingenuity turned to the darkest purposes. What made this weapon so devastating was not merely its incendiary properties, but its psychological impact. Imagine facing an enemy who could literally set the sea ablaze, who possessed what seemed like supernatural power to command fire itself. Arab chroniclers describe the terror that Greek fire inspired among their forces. Seasoned warriors who had conquered from Spain to Persia found themselves paralyzed by fear when confronted with this mysterious Byzantine weapon. The formula for Greek fire was perhaps the most closely guarded state secret in medieval history. The knowledge passed through specific families, bound by oaths that carried penalties of death for betrayal. Even within the imperial administration, only a handful of officials knew the complete process. The artificers who mixed the ingredients worked in isolation, each knowing only his portion of the formula, like pieces of a puzzle that could only be assembled by the master craftsman. Modern attempts to recreate Greek fire have produced various theories. Some scholars suggest a mixture based on petroleum. Others propose combinations involving quicklime, sulfur, and niter. The most sophisticated analyses point toward a complex compound that might have included distilled petroleum, pine resin, sulfur, saltpeter, and perhaps even primitive forms of napalm-like substances. But the exact proportions, the precise preparation methods, the specific additives that gave it such terrible effectiveness, these remain locked in history's vault. Picture the workshops where this deadly substance was prepared, hidden deep within Constantinople's administrative quarter. The artificers would arrive before dawn, their faces bearing the distinctive scars and burns that marked their profession. The air would be thick with acrid smoke and the sharp scents of sulfur and heated metals. Each batch required perfect timing, precise temperatures, and an understanding of chemical processes that bordered on alchemy. The secrecy surrounding Greek fire extended beyond mere military necessity. The Byzantines themselves came to view it with a mixture of pride and superstitious dread. Some chroniclers suggest that the formula was believed to have been revealed by an angel to Constantine the Great, making it not just a weapon, but a sacred trust. To betray the secret would be to betray God himself, ensuring both earthly punishment and eternal damnation. As centuries passed, this very secrecy became the weapon's weakness. When the families who guarded the knowledge died out or fell from favor, portions of the formula vanished with them. Political upheavals disrupted the careful apprenticeship systems that preserved technical knowledge. By the time of Byzantium's final crisis, the empire that had once commanded liquid fire found itself defenseless against Ottoman cannons. The last recorded use of true Greek fire occurs in the 12th century, though references to similar incendiary weapons persist into the empire's final decades. By 1453, when Mehmed the Conqueror's artillery pounds Constantinople's ancient walls, the defenders possess only conventional weapons. The secret that had once saved the city from Arab conquest had become another casualty of time and political chaos. But Greek fire represents only one layer of Byzantine mystery. Let us now turn our attention to an even grander puzzle: the Great Palace itself, the vast complex that served as the ceremonial and administrative heart of the empire for nearly 1,000 years. Today, beneath the streets and buildings of modern Istanbul, the palace's remains lie buried like a lost civilization, offering tantalizing glimpses of a grandeur that once amazed the medieval world. Picture the Great Palace at its zenith, perhaps during Theodora and Justinian's reign. This was not a single building, but a sprawling complex covering nearly 400 acres, stretching from the Hagia Sophia down to the seawalls overlooking the Sea of Marmara. Within its boundaries lay dozens of distinct structures: throne rooms and private chambers, chapels and libraries, workshops and treasuries, gardens and courtyards, baths and cisterns, all connected by marble corridors that gleamed with mosaic decorations. The palace grew organically over centuries as successive emperors added new wings, renovated existing structures, and adapted the complex to changing needs and tastes. By the 10th century, it had become a city within a city, housing not just the imperial family, but thousands of courtiers, servants, guards, craftsmen, and administrators. Its layout was so complex that even palace officials could become lost in its labyrinthine passages. Archaeological investigation of the Great Palace presents extraordinary challenges. Much of the site lies beneath densely populated neighborhoods where excavation is virtually impossible. The portions that have been explored reveal construction techniques and decorative programs of stunning sophistication, but these glimpses only hint at the complex's original scale and magnificence. One of the most remarkable discoveries occurred in the 1930s and 1950s, when archaeologists uncovered portions of the palace's mosaic pavements near the modern Blue Mosque. These mosaics, dating to the 6th century, display a level of artistry that rivals the finest Roman work. Imagine walking across floors decorated with scenes of pastoral life: shepherds tending their flocks, hunters pursuing wild animals, children playing amid flowering meadows, all rendered in thousands of tiny stone cubes whose colors remain vibrant after 15 centuries. The mosaics reveal something profound about Byzantine imperial ideology. Rather than depicting military victories or imperial ceremonies, these floors show scenes of peaceful prosperity. The empire as a garden of earthly delights, where harmony and abundance flourish under imperial protection. Each tiny tessera was placed by craftsmen whose names are lost to history, but whose artistic vision continues to inspire wonder in modern visitors. Picture yourself as a foreign ambassador arriving at the Great Palace for the first time, perhaps in the year 950 AD. Your ship has docked at the imperial harbor, and you are escorted up marble steps that rise directly from the water. Guards in gleaming armor and silk surcoats line your path, their weapons both functional and ceremonial, designed to impress as much as to defend. The first courtyard takes your breath away. Fountains send jets of perfumed water high into the air, their droplets catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. Peacocks strut across manicured lawns, their brilliant plumage echoing the colors of the mosaic panels that decorate the surrounding colonnades. The air carries the mingled scents of roses, jasmine, and frankincense from the palace chapels. But the most extraordinary feature of the Great Palace may have been its mechanical wonders. Byzantine engineers, inheriting traditions from both Rome and Alexandria, created automata that seemed to bring the palace to life. Contemporary accounts describe golden trees whose mechanical birds sang when imperial ceremonies required musical accompaniment. Lions crafted from precious metals would roar and move their heads when the emperor approached his throne. A golden plane tree stood in one courtyard, its leaves rustling and its branches moving as if stirred by invisible breezes. These automata served multiple purposes beyond mere entertainment. They demonstrated Byzantine technological superiority to visiting dignitaries, reinforced the emperor's quasi-divine status through apparent mastery over nature itself, and created an atmosphere of otherworldly magnificence that elevated imperial ceremonies beyond ordinary human experience. Consider the Magnora Palace, one of the complex's most important structures, where the emperor received foreign embassies. The throne room featured a ceiling mechanism that could raise the emperor's seat high into the air during audiences, literally elevating him above his visitors, while mechanical lions roared approval and golden birds sang hymns of praise. Foreign ambassadors, already overwhelmed by the palace's visual splendor, found themselves participating in ceremonies that seemed to blur the line between earthly court and heavenly choir. The palace's library system may have been its greatest treasure, though one whose extent we can only imagine. Scattered references suggest collections that included not just Greek and Latin texts, but works in Arabic, Persian, Syriac, and numerous other languages. Here were preserved the writings of classical antiquity that would otherwise have been lost forever, copied and recopied by generations of scribes who maintained intellectual traditions across centuries of political upheaval. Picture the palace scriptoriums, where these precious texts were maintained. Monks and secular scribes worked in chambers designed to provide optimal light for detailed work, their desks positioned near windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. The air would be thick with the scents of parchment, ink, and the various preservatives used to protect manuscripts from decay and insect damage. Each book represented months or years of careful labor, from the preparation of writing materials through the final decoration of completed volumes. The scribes worked with reverent attention to detail, understanding that they were preserving not just information, but entire worlds of knowledge that might otherwise vanish from human memory. Their work continues to benefit us today. Many classical texts survive only because Byzantine scribes copied them during the empire's long twilight. Yet for all its magnificence, the Great Palace was also a place of profound melancholy. By the 11th century, economic pressures forced successive emperors to abandon portions of the complex. Entire wings fell into disuse, their golden decorations tarnishing, their marble columns cracking from neglect. Valuable furnishings were sold to finance military campaigns that grew increasingly desperate as the empire's borders contracted. The palace's decline mirrors Byzantium's own trajectory, a civilization that never quite accepted its reduced circumstances, that continued to maintain the elaborate ceremonies of universal empire even as its actual territory shrank to little more than Constantinople and its immediate surroundings. Foreign visitors in the empire's final centuries describe a court that maintained its ancient protocols amid increasingly obvious decay, like actors continuing a performance long after most of the audience has departed. When Constantinople finally falls in 1453, Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror explores the abandoned palace with something approaching reverence. Ottoman accounts describe vast chambers filled with magnificent debris, broken mosaics, fragments of silk hangings, pieces of the mechanical marvels that had once amazed medieval visitors. Much of what the Sultan found was beyond repair, damaged by centuries of neglect and the final siege's violence. The new rulers gradually demolished most of the remaining structures, using their materials for Ottoman construction projects. The palace's marble columns were incorporated into mosques and baths, its bronze fittings melted down for cannons, its mosaics broken up or covered with newer decorations that reflected different aesthetic values and religious requirements. Today, archaeologists continue to uncover fragments of the great palace's vanished glory. Each excavation reveals new mysteries, underground chambers whose purposes remain unclear, fragments of decorative programs whose complete designs we can only imagine, engineering solutions whose sophistication challenges assumptions about medieval technical knowledge. Perhaps the greatest mystery is how completely such a vast and magnificent complex could vanish from the landscape. The palace that once covered 400 acres, that housed thousands of people, that contained libraries, workshops, treasuries and gardens, all of this has been absorbed into the soil of modern Istanbul, waiting beneath busy streets for patient archaeologists to reveal its secrets piece by precious piece. As you rest now, imagine those lost corridors stretching through darkness beneath the modern city, their marble floors still perfect after centuries of abandonment, their mosaic walls still gleaming with colors that no living eye has seen. In dreams, perhaps, we might walk those vanished halls once more, breathing air perfumed with roses and frankincense, listening to the whispered conversations of long-dead courtiers, witnessing ceremonies whose magnificence challenged the very boundaries between earth and heaven. The secrets of Greek fire and the mysteries of the Great Palace remind us that even the most powerful civilizations leave behind puzzles that resist solution, wonders that tantalize us with glimpses of knowledge and beauty that may be lost forever. In their silence, these mysteries speak eloquently of human ambition and creativity, of the eternal tension between preservation and change, of the melancholy truth that even the grandest achievements must eventually yield to time's patient erosion. As the mysteries of lost palaces and vanished secrets fade into the gentle shadows of memory, let us ascend once more to the pinnacle of Byzantine society. Here, in the rarefied atmosphere where emperors and empresses held court, we discover a world of such elaborate luxury and intricate ceremony that it challenged the very boundaries of human imagination. Tonight, we explore the social rituals of the Byzantine elite, their magnificent banquets, their silk-draped chambers, and their ceremonies of unimaginable opulence that transformed political necessity into high art. Picture yourself stepping through golden doors into the triclinos of the 19 couches, one of the great palace's most splendid dining halls, on a spring evening in the year 944 AD. Emperor Constantine VII, Porphyrogenitos, born in the purple, has summoned the empire's greatest nobles for a banquet celebrating the successful conclusion of a military campaign in the east. The very air seems to shimmer with wealth and power, thick with the mingled fragrances of rare spices, exotic perfumes, and the sweet smoke of precious incense. The hall itself defies earthly comparison. 19 dining couches, each crafted from ebony and ivory and draped with silk the color of wine-dark seas, are arranged around the chamber's periphery. Above, the domed ceiling displays a mosaic of such intricate beauty that guests often forget to eat as they trace its patterns with wondering eyes. Here, Christ Pantocrator gazes down benevolently, surrounded by a celestial court of saints and angels whose golden halos catch and scatter the light from hundreds of oil lamps suspended on silver chains. The floor beneath your feet tells its own story of imperial grandeur. Marble from every corner of the known world has been assembled here. Porphyry from Egypt that glows like frozen wine. Verde Antico from Greece that captures the deep shadows of ancient forests, and Proconnetian marble from islands in the nearby sea, pale as morning clouds and veined with silver threads that seem to pulse with inner light. But it is the guests themselves who truly transform this architectural marvel into a living tableau of Byzantine power. Each figure, reclining on the precious couches, represents generations of accumulated influence, vast estates scattered across the empire's remaining territories, and bloodlines that trace back to the heroes of classical antiquity or the saints of Christian legend. Their garments alone would bankrupt lesser kingdoms, silk tunics worked with golden thread, cloaks fastened with brooches of pearl and precious stones, and shoes whose leather has been dyed with pigments more valuable than silver. The emperor himself occupies a position that elevates him both literally and symbolically above his guests. His couch, raised on a platform of marble steps, places him at the chamber's focal point while simultaneously emphasizing the vast social distance between imperial majesty and even the highest nobility. Constantine VII wears purple silk of such deep richness that it seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, and his diadem, a band of gold studded with gems whose names exist in no modern language, catches the lamplight and scatters it in patterns that seem almost supernatural. Imagine the moment when the banquet formally begins. A chamberlain strikes a silver gong, its pure tone resonating through the chamber and signaling the arrival of the first course. But this is no mere meal. It is theatre, ceremony, and political statement woven together with threads of gold and silk. Each dish that appears represents not just culinary art, but imperial ideology, a reminder of the empire's vast reach and sophisticated culture. The servers themselves form part of the spectacle. Young men of aristocratic families, dressed in tunics of white silk belted with golden cords, move through the chamber with practiced grace. To serve at imperial banquets is itself a mark of distinction, a sign that one's family has achieved sufficient status to participate in the most sacred rituals of imperial life. They carry vessels of such exquisite craftsmanship that each piece could serve as a diplomatic gift to foreign rulers. Silver platters inlaid with niello work that depict scenes from classical mythology, golden cups whose handles are shaped like dolphins or lions, and crystal decanters that seem to capture starlight in their depths. The food itself represents a symphony of flavors drawn from across the Mediterranean world and beyond. Picture dishes that arrive as much for their visual impact as their taste. Peacocks roasted and then reassembled with their brilliant plumage intact. Their flesh seasoned with spices from India and Ceylon that cost more than most families see in a lifetime. Lampreys from the Danube, prepared in a sauce of wine and honey that has been aged in amphoras buried in the palace gardens for decades. Caviar from the Black Sea, served in bowls, carved from single pieces of ivory and accompanied by bread baked from wheat grown on imperial estates in Egypt. But observe the elaborate etiquette that governs every aspect of the meal. No guest may begin eating until the emperor has tasted each course. No one may speak unless addressed by someone of higher rank. The order in which dishes are served, the specific couches on which different nobles recline, even the colors of the napkins provided to each guest. All of these details communicate subtle messages about imperial favor, political alliances, and social hierarchies that extend far beyond the dining chamber's walls. Between courses, entertainments appear that blur the line between art and magic. Acrobats from Egypt perform feats that seem to defy the laws of nature, their silk-clad bodies moving through the air like colorful birds. Musicians from Armenia play instruments of such delicate construction that their melodies seem to float rather than sound, creating harmonies that speak to something deeper than mere hearing. Most remarkably, the mechanical marvels for which the palace is famous make their appearance. The golden tree, whose leaves rustle without wind, whose mechanical birds sing songs that change with the seasons and the emperor's mood. Picture the moment when this golden tree, perhaps 8 feet tall and crafted by artisans whose techniques died with the empire's fall, begins its performance. As if stirred by invisible breezes, its branches sway gently, while dozens of mechanical birds, larks, nightingales, and species that exist only in the imaginations of master craftsmen, open their beaks to produce melodies of haunting beauty. Some guests claim the songs vary according to the political tensions of the moment, growing more complex when diplomatic crises threaten and settling into peaceful harmonies when the empire enjoys stability. As the evening progresses, conversation flows like the finest wine, but always within carefully prescribed channels. Palace intellectuals discuss theological questions whose answers might influence imperial policy toward religious minorities. Military commanders share carefully edited accounts of recent campaigns, emphasizing victories while diplomatically minimizing setbacks. Court poets recite verses celebrating imperial virtues in language so refined that mere mortals struggle to comprehend their elevated sentiments. But beneath this veneer of cultured sophistication, every guest remains acutely aware of the political currents that actually determine their fates. A subtle change in the emperor's expression when certain names are mentioned. The conspicuous absence of nobles who were present at previous gatherings. The seating arrangements that place traditional rivals near each other or separate longtime allies. All of these details are parsed and analyzed with the intensity of theological scholars examining sacred texts. Consider the elaborate ceremony surrounding the imperial wine service. Each vintage that appears has been selected not merely for its flavor, but for its symbolic significance. Wine from vineyards on imperial estates in Greece reminds guests of the empire's classical heritage. Vintages from recently reconquered territories in Italy celebrate military successes and hint at future campaigns. Most prized of all are wines from the emperor's private reserves, some aged for decades in cellars beneath the palace, their consumption representing an almost sacramental sharing in imperial essence. The vessels from which this precious liquid is consumed constitute artworks in their own right. Golden cups, whose surfaces display scenes from the life of Christ, worked in relief so fine that each apostle's expression seems to shift in the changing light. Silver goblets inlaid with precious stones, arranged to form mystical symbols whose meanings are debated by palace theologians. Crystal chalices so perfectly transparent that the wine within seems to float unsupported, defying earthly physics through the magic of superior craftsmanship. As midnight approaches, the banquet reaches its ceremonial climax. The emperor rises, an action that brings every conversation to immediate silence and compels all guests to prostrate themselves once again upon the marble floor. In a voice trained by the best rhetoricians in the empire, Constantine VII delivers an address that weaves together gratitude to God for imperial victories, praise for the loyalty of his assembled nobles, and subtle warnings about the consequences of disloyalty or presumption. His words carry the weight of absolute authority, but they are delivered with the refined eloquence that marks truly superior education. Every sentence is crafted like a line of poetry, every concept developed with the logical precision that the emperor learned during his scholarly youth. This is oratory as high art, language refined to such purity that it seems to transcend mere human communication and approach divine revelation. When the formal address concludes, the evening's most remarkable ceremony begins. Palace servants appear carrying what appears to be a small golden city, a miniature Constantinople complete with walls, towers, churches and palaces, all crafted from precious metals and adorned with gems that represent the lights of the imperial capital at night. This mechanical marvel, powered by hidden clockwork mechanisms, slowly unfolds to reveal its interior chambers, while tiny figures move through its streets in elaborate processions. This golden city serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates Byzantine technical superiority to any foreign dignitaries who might be present. It creates a sense of wonder that reinforces the emperor's quasi-divine status. Most importantly, it provides a concrete symbol of imperial ideology. The idea that Constantinople represents not just a political capital, but a heavenly city on earth, the New Jerusalem, where divine and human authority merge in perfect harmony. Picture the guests' faces as they watch this mechanical miracle unfold. Hardened military commanders, whose careers have been built on practical violence and strategic calculation, find themselves transported by the sheer beauty of the spectacle. Sophisticated courtiers, cynical from decades of political maneuvering, temporarily forget their calculations as they witness artistry that transcends ordinary human achievement. Even palace intellectuals, trained to analyze and categorize every experience, struggle to find adequate words for phenomena that seem to bridge the gap between earthly craft and heavenly miracle. But as the evening draws toward its close, a subtle melancholy begins to permeate the chamber. The guests understand, though they would never voice such thoughts aloud, that these magnificent ceremonies serve partly to mask the empire's declining fortunes. The territories celebrated in tonight's toasts are smaller than those praised at similar banquets a generation earlier. The armies whose victories provide occasion for this feast are composed increasingly of foreign mercenaries rather than native Byzantine troops. The wealth displayed so lavishly in this chamber represents an ever larger proportion of the empire's dwindling resources. Yet this awareness only intensifies the evening's emotional impact. Like the mechanical birds in their golden tree, these courtiers perform their elaborate social rituals with heightened poignancy, precisely because they sense their own transience. The Byzantine Empire of 944 AD still commands respect throughout the known world, still produces art and literature of extraordinary sophistication, still maintains ceremonies that dazzle foreign visitors and inspire its own citizens. But thoughtful observers can detect the subtle signs of entropy that will, over the coming centuries, gradually transform this magnificent civilization into a mere shadow of its former greatness. As the banquet finally ends and guests begin their elaborate farewells, each departure choreographed according to strict protocol that reflects social hierarchies and political relationships, imagine yourself lingering in the now quiet chamber. The golden tree continues its mechanical song, though its audience has departed. The oil lamps burn lower, casting shifting shadows on mosaics that will outlast the empire they celebrate. The marble floor, still warm from the press of silk-shod feet, awaits the palace servants who will restore everything to perfect order before dawn. In this moment of quiet reflection, the chamber seems to embody all of Byzantine civilization's contradictions. Here is beauty that approaches the divine, created by humans whose political system often descends to bestial cruelty. Here is sophistication that rivals classical antiquity, maintained by a society increasingly isolated from the dynamic changes transforming the wider world. Here is wealth beyond imagination, concentrated in a single evening's entertainment while the empire's frontiers crumble for lack of adequate defense. The silk hangings that decorate the chamber's walls rustle gently in breezes that carry the salt scent of the nearby sea. Through windows of glass so perfectly clear that it seems like crystallized air, The lights of Constantinople twinkle in the darkness, a million souls going about their nightly routines, unaware of the elaborate ceremonies that have just concluded in their name and for their supposed benefit. Rest now in the knowledge that human beings, given sufficient resources and refined sensibilities, can create social rituals of extraordinary beauty and complexity. The Byzantine court ceremonies we have witnessed tonight represent one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to transform the basic necessities of political life. The distribution of resources, the management of competing ambitions, the maintenance of social order into high art that elevates participants above their ordinary limitations and connects them, however briefly, with ideals of perfection that transcend earthly existence. Sleep peacefully, surrounded by imagined silk and the soft glow of oil lamps, while mechanical birds sing lullabies in a golden tree that continues its ancient performance long after its imperial audience has departed for chambers decorated with mosaics of saints and angels, there to dream of ceremonies even more magnificent than those they have witnessed in their earthly palace by the sea. The morning mist clings to the mountainside as you open your eyes in your small stone dwelling, nestled at an altitude that would leave most modern humans gasping for breath. You are a chasqui now, a messenger of the great Inca Empire, and today, like every day for the past 3 years, you will run until your body screams for mercy. The air at 12,000 feet above sea level contains roughly 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Imagine trying to fill your lungs with substance that feels more like thin soup than air. Your chest works constantly, your heart hammering against your ribs as it struggles to push what little oxygen you can gather through your bloodstream. This is your normal state of being. This is the baseline from which your day begins, before you've even started running. You rise before dawn, as you always do, your bare feet touching the cold stone floor of your quarters near the road station, or tambo. The morning ritual never varies. You consume a simple meal, perhaps some toasted maize kernels, a piece of dried llama meat, and a small portion of chuño, those freeze-dried potatoes that can sustain life in these harsh altitudes where nothing else will grow. Your stomach, adapted to this sparse diet, accepts this meager fuel that must power you through miles of vertical terrain. The weight of responsibility settles on your shoulders like a heavy blanket as you prepare for your shift. In your hands, you hold objects that could determine the fate of entire provinces. Delicate quipu, those intricate systems of knotted colored cords that serve as the empire's memory. Each knot, each color, each twist of fiber represents information that you cannot read, but which you must protect with your life. Tax records, census data, astronomical calculations, military intelligence. All of this knowledge dangles from your fingers in a collection of strings that seems impossibly fragile for such crucial information. The quipu you carry today weighs perhaps 2 pounds, but you know that some of your fellow runners bear loads 3 times as heavy. The larger quipu contain the complex records of entire regions, population counts that stretch into the hundreds of thousands, tribute requirements that encompass every imaginable resource, from golden ornaments to sheets of vicuña wool. You cannot decipher these records yourself, for you are not a quipuka mayok, one of the elite record keepers who understand the intricate language of knots. You are simply the vessel, the human conveyor belt that ensures this precious information reaches its destination. As you step outside your quarters, the pre-dawn air hits your lungs like iced water. Around you, the tambo is already stirring with quiet activity. These road stations, positioned roughly every 12 to 15 miles along the empire's vast network of roads, represent the heartbeat of Inca civilization. Here, weary runners like yourself hand off their precious cargo to fresh legs, ensuring that messages never stop moving across the empire's impossible geography. You flex your toes against the cold stone, feeling the thick calluses that have built up over years of running on surfaces that would shred modern footwear in minutes. Your feet have become tools as specialized as any craftsman's implements. The soles thick and leathery, the arches strong as steel cables, the toes splayed and gripping like the talons of a mountain bird. These feet are your most valuable possession, more precious than any golden ornament that might adorn an Inca noble. The sound of approaching footsteps echoes off the stone walls, accompanied by the rhythmic panting of an exhausted runner. Here comes your predecessor, his legs trembling with fatigue, his lungs working like bellows as he clutches the precious quipu you must now carry forward. His face, weathered by years of exposure to the intense ultraviolet radiation of high altitude, shows the strain of his journey. The whites of his eyes are shot through with tiny blood vessels burst from the exertion of running in thin air. The handoff is swift and ceremonial. You receive the quipu with both hands, acknowledging the sacred nature of your burden. The exhausted runner gasps out any urgent details. Military intelligence for the garrison at Ollantaytambo, or census records from the Chachapoya province needed before the next new moon. Every word is crucial, for a misdelivered message could result in failed harvests, military disasters, or administrative chaos that ripples through thousands of lives. And then you run. The first steps are always the hardest, as your body rebels against the demand for oxygen it cannot provide. Your breathing becomes a conscious effort, each inhalation a small victory against the thin air. The road beneath your feet is a marvel of engineering, fitted stone blocks that create a surface more durable than anything the Spanish conquistadors had seen in Europe. These roads climb impossibly steep mountainsides, wind through narrow passes where one misstep would send you tumbling hundreds of feet to your death, and stretch across landscapes so desolate that they seem to belong to another planet entirely. Within the first mile, your legs find their rhythm, but your lungs never stop burning. The lactic acid builds in your muscles like molten metal, yet you cannot slow down. The Empire's message system depends on precise timing. Delay means chaos, and chaos in the Inca Empire can mean death. Not just for you, but for the thousands of people whose lives depend on the accurate flow of information. As you run, your mind begins to detach from the immediate discomfort, entering a meditative state that experienced chasqui develop as a survival mechanism. You focus on the rhythm of your breathing, the steady impact of your feet against stone, the subtle shift in the weight of the quipu as it bounces against your back. This mental discipline is as crucial to your survival as your physical conditioning, for the mind that fixates on pain and exhaustion will fail long before the body reaches its limits. The landscape around you is both beautiful and terrifying. Peaks that scrape the sky rise on all sides, their snow-covered summits gleaming like polished silver in the morning sun. Below you, valleys drop away into misty depths where the air grows thick and the vegetation changes from the hardy grasses of the Altiplano to the lush greenery of the cloud forest. This vertical geography means that in a single day's run, you might experience climate zones that in other parts of the world would require thousands of miles of horizontal travel to encounter. But this beauty comes with deadly consequences. The weather in these mountains can change in minutes, transforming a clear morning into a blizzard that can freeze you to death in your tracks. The thin air that makes every step a struggle also means that cuts and wounds heal slowly, and infections that would be minor annoyances at sea level can become life-threatening emergencies. Your body exists in a constant state of stress, pushed beyond what human physiology was designed to endure. The wildlife you encounter on these runs represents another constant threat. Pumas stalk the high passes, their powerful bodies perfectly adapted to the thin air that leaves you gasping. These cats can run down a deer at altitude without breaking stride, and to them an exhausted human runner represents easy prey. You carry no weapons, save a simple sling and a handful of stones, for anything heavier would slow you down and compromise your mission. Your primary defense against predators is speed. Ironic, considering that speed is also what leaves you most vulnerable when your energy reserves run low. Then there are the condors, massive birds with wingspans that can exceed 10 feet, circling overhead like omens of death. While they primarily feed on carrion, an exhausted runner who stumbles and falls might find himself at the mercy of these opportunistic scavengers. Their presence serves as a constant reminder of how thin the line is between success and disaster in this harsh environment. As the hours pass, your body begins to consume itself for fuel. The meager breakfast you consumed feels like a distant memory as your muscles start breaking down their own protein to keep you moving. Your kidneys work overtime to process the metabolic waste products flooding your system, and the constant dehydration at altitude means your urine grows dark and concentrated, a sure sign that your body is approaching its limits. The mental challenges are as brutal as the physical ones. The isolation of the mountain roads means you might run for hours without seeing another human being. The silence is broken only by the whistle of wind through rocky passes and the rhythmic pounding of your feet against stone. This sensory deprivation can trigger hallucinations, phantom voices calling from side paths, imaginary figures beckoning from cliff edges, false visions of rest stops that dissolve into empty air as you approach. The pressure of carrying messages you cannot read adds another layer of psychological stress. You know that the knotted cords bouncing against your back might contain orders that will send armies to war, or agricultural instructions that will determine whether entire communities live through the next winter. The weight of this responsibility is crushing, made worse by the knowledge that you are simply a conduit, unable to evaluate or understand the information you risk your life to transport. Mistake a single knot position. Allow the quipu to become damaged by moisture or rough handling, and you might doom thousands to starvation or military defeat. The penalty for losing or damaging official messages is swift and final. Execution, carried out in the next tambo you reach. There are no second chances for a chasqui who fails in his duty, no appeals or explanations that can save you once the precious information in your care is compromised. The physical breakdown begins subtly, with small signs that experienced runners learn to recognize and fear. Your peripheral vision starts to narrow as oxygen deprivation affects your brain. Your coordination becomes imprecise, causing you to stumble slightly on uneven stones. Your normally perfect sense of balance wavers as inner ear problems, common at high altitude, begin to manifest. These are the warning signs that you are pushing beyond your body's ability to function, yet stopping is not an option. Your heart, working at maximum capacity for hours on end, begins to show signs of strain. The chest pains that every chasqui knows intimately start as a dull ache and gradually intensify to sharp, stabbing sensations that feel like a condor's talons piercing your ribcage. Your pulse becomes irregular, skipping beats as your cardiovascular system struggles to maintain the impossible pace you demand of it. The cold becomes your enemy as much as the exertion. At these altitudes, temperatures can drop below freezing even during sunny days, and the sweat that pours off your body during the uphill climbs can freeze solid during exposed ridge crossings. Hypothermia becomes a real risk as your body struggles to maintain core temperature while simultaneously fueling the massive caloric demands of extended running. Your feet, despite their conditioning, begin to fail you as the miles accumulate. Blisters form and burst, leaving raw wounds that grind against the stone roadway with each step. The constant pounding creates microfractures in the bones of your feet and shins, stress injuries that will plague you for the rest of your career, however long that might be. Most chasqui do not survive more than 5 years in active service. The human body simply cannot endure this level of punishment indefinitely. The approach to your destination brings both relief and fresh anxiety. Relief because your ordeal is nearly over, anxiety because you must now account for every aspect of your journey. The Tambo captain who receives the quipu will examine every knot, every fiber, looking for signs of damage or tampering. He will question you about any delays, any unusual incidents, any circumstances that might have compromised the integrity of the message you carry. If all is well, you receive the simple acknowledgement that represents the highest praise a Chasqui can hope for, a nod of acceptance, a small ration of food, and permission to rest until it is time to carry the next message back along your section of the route. If something is wrong, if a knot has shifted or a cord has frayed, you face questioning that can quickly turn into an interrogation with fatal consequences. But for now, imagine yourself as you hand over the precious quipu, your duty fulfilled for another day. Your lungs still burn, your legs still tremble with exhaustion, and your heart still pounds against your ribs like a trapped bird. Yet you have succeeded where many would have failed. You have carried the lifeblood of an empire across terrain that would challenge modern athletes equipped with the finest gear and training. As you collapse onto the simple sleeping mat in your quarters, every muscle in your body screaming for rest, you know that tomorrow will bring another quipu, another desperate run across impossible terrain, another test of whether your body can continue to perform miracles that modern science says should be impossible. The rhythm of your breathing slows gradually as exhaustion overtakes you. Your heartbeat, still elevated from the day's exertion, provides a steady drumbeat that carries you towards sleep. Around you, the Tambo settles into its evening routine, preparing for another night of constant vigilance along the roads that bind the empire together. In your dreams, you are still running, your feet finding purchase on endless stone pathways that stretch across a landscape painted in shades of gold and shadow. The quipu bounces against your back like a living thing, its knotted secrets whispering in a language you will never understand, but will die to protect. This is the life you have chosen, or perhaps the life that has chosen you. This is what it means to be the human infrastructure of the greatest empire the Americas have ever known. This is why you would not survive as an Inca road runner, because survival, in the traditional sense, was never part of the bargain. The morning of November 16th, 1532, dawns clear and cold in the highland city of Cajamarca. You are no longer the anonymous Chasqui of our first journey. Now you are Chuya, a messenger who has served the empire for 7 years, your legs carrying the words of gods and kings across distances that would humble the swiftest condor. Today, you carry messages that will echo through history, though you do not yet know that the world you have served so faithfully is about to end forever. The quipu in your hands feels different this morning, heavier somehow, though its physical weight has not changed. The knots seem to pulse with urgency, their colors more vivid in the pale dawn light. These are not routine administrative messages about tribute collection or road maintenance. These cords carry the words of Atahualpa himself, the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler whose every breath is sacred, whose every command reshapes reality across an empire that stretches from modern-day Ecuador to Chile. You do not know it yet, but the man whose messages you carry is already a prisoner. In the square behind you, Spanish conquistadors under Francisco Pizarro wait in ambush, their steel weapons and horses hidden in the buildings that surround the great plaza of Cajamarca. The trap has been set with the precision of a spider's web, and the divine emperor of 12 million people walks unknowingly toward his doom. Your instructions are clear, delivered to you by a Quipuca Mayok, whose hands trembled as he tied the final knots. You must carry these messages to the regional governors throughout the northern provinces, informing them of the strange, bearded visitors who claim to serve a distant king, who speak of a god nailed to crossed wooden beams, and who seem to possess magic that makes thunder without clouds. The messages contain questions that reveal how completely the arrival of the Spanish has shattered the Inca understanding of the world. Are these men divine? Are they the returned Viracocha, the creator god of Inca mythology? How should the empire respond to beings who seem to command forces beyond nature itself? As you begin your run toward the first tambo, the sound of your footsteps mingles with others, echoing across the plaza behind you. Thousands of Inca nobles and their retinues are gathering for what they believe will be a ceremonial meeting with the strange visitors. They come dressed in their finest vicuña wool garments, their golden ornaments catching the morning light like captured stars. The air vibrates with the sound of thousands of voices, a low, harmonic hum that speaks of anticipation and barely contained excitement. You have run perhaps 2 miles when the sound reaches you. A noise unlike anything you have ever heard, a thunderous crash that seems to shake the very mountains. It is the sound of Spanish harquebuses firing in unison, followed by the screams of horses and men, the clash of steel against bronze, the death cry of an empire. But you are already too far away to turn back, and your duty compels you forward regardless. The messages you carry must be delivered no matter what chaos erupts behind you. The first tambo you reach buzzes with confusion and fear. The station captain, a grizzled veteran of the Empire's communication system, receives your quipu with hands that shake slightly. He has heard the distant sounds too, and the smoke rising from the direction of Cajamarca tells a story that no one wants to believe. But the system must continue, the messages must flow, and so he dispatches fresh runners to carry your precious cargo deeper into the Empire's heartland. Over the following days, as you make your way back toward Cajamarca on the return journey, you begin to encounter other runners carrying messages that grow progressively more desperate and confused. The quipu they bear seem to writhe with anguish, their knots twisted in patterns you have never seen before, their colors darker and more ominous. From these runners, you piece together fragments of the impossible truth. Atahualpa has been captured. The divine emperor, the living god whose word was absolute law across an empire larger than Rome at its height, is now a prisoner of fewer than 200 foreign invaders. The messages you now carry speak of ransom demands beyond comprehension. The strange bearded men want gold, not worked gold fashioned into objects of beauty and spiritual significance, but raw gold, melted down and formed into bars like common metal. They want enough gold to fill a room, a demand so absurd that the Quipucamayok who recorded it had to create entirely new knot combinations to express the concept. The very idea that someone would destroy the artistic achievements of generations of master craftsmen, melting down objects sacred to the sun, God himself, seems like madness beyond understanding. Your feet carry you through landscapes that seem unchanged by the cosmic catastrophe unfolding in the north. The ancient roads still wind through mountain passes where condors circle overhead. Still cross bridges woven from grass that spans gorges carved by rivers older than human memory. The tambos continue to function with mechanical precision, their staffs maintaining the routines developed over centuries of imperial administration. Yet something fundamental has shifted in the spiritual fabric of the empire, a change as subtle but profound as a barely perceptible crack in a temple's foundation. As you run, you begin to notice details that speak of growing chaos. Messages arrive out of sequence, their delivery times increasingly erratic as the psychological impact of Atahualpa's capture spreads through the courier system. Some runners arrive at tambos wild-eyed and babbling about visions of bearded demons riding four-legged monsters, their accounts dismissed as altitude sickness or exhaustion-induced hallucinations until the reports become too consistent to ignore. The quipu themselves begin to change, becoming more complex and contradictory as the empire's administrators struggle to process information that challenges every assumption about the nature of reality. New knot patterns appear, desperate attempts to encode concepts for which the traditional system has no vocabulary. How do you record in knots the idea of men who seem immune to the weapons that have served the empire for generations? How do you express in colored chord the concept of creatures that are part man, part beast, moving as one entity with minds that seem to think in perfect unity? You carry messages from regional governors who describe their attempts to understand the invaders through traditional frameworks of Inca thought. Some believe the Spanish are messengers from the underworld, explaining their pale skin as the coloration of beings who have never seen the sun. Others theorize that they are advanced scouts for the return of Viracocha, the creator god who, according to prophecy, would one day return from across the waters to reclaim his creation. The most terrifying possibility, whispered in messages encoded with knots so complex that only the most skilled Quipucamayok can decipher them, is that these beings represent something entirely outside Inca cosmology. A force for which the empire has no defense because it has no context for understanding their nature. The psychological impact on you as a messenger becomes increasingly severe as the weeks pass. You have dedicated your life to serving an emperor who claimed divine status, whose authority derived from his supposed connection to Inti, the sun god. Now, that emperor sits in a Spanish prison, forced to gather gold like a common miner, his divine nature apparently powerless against steel weapons and horse cavalry. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming, like discovering that the sun itself can be captured and caged by sufficiently determined mortals. Your fellow runners begin to show signs of the strain. Some disappear entirely, abandoning their posts to flee into the remote valleys where they hope the coming chaos will not reach them. Others become obsessively devoted to their duties, running themselves to death rather than face the implications of the messages they carry. You witness one veteran Chasqui collapse and die at a tambo, his heart giving out after days of carrying increasingly desperate pleas for military assistance that will never come. The messages you carry during this period read like the fever dreams of a dying civilization. Atahualpa's communications, smuggled out of his Spanish prison through networks of spies and sympathizers, reveal a mind struggling to comprehend defeat by creatures he alternately describes as demons, gods, and simply men with superior tools. His messages speak of gold gathered from across the empire, golden plates stripped from temple walls, ceremonial vessels melted down to their base metal, artistic treasures accumulated over generations of imperial expansion reduced to anonymous bars of bullion. Through your hands passes intelligence about the Spanish that reads like reports from an alien world, descriptions of their weapons that kill from distances greater than any Inca bow can achieve, their armor that seems to make them invulnerable to traditional weapons, their horses that move with the speed of wind and strike with the power of landslides. The reports speak of Spanish appetites that seem bottomless, not just for gold, but for silver, for precious stones, for women, for the very substance of Inca civilization itself. You carry messages that reveal the empire's desperate attempts to adapt to this new reality. Military commanders send reports of experiments with new tactics designed to counter Spanish advantages, attempts to train warriors to fight horse cavalry, efforts to reverse engineer Spanish weapons, plans to use the empire's superior numbers and knowledge of local terrain to overwhelm the invaders through sheer persistence. These messages carry an undertone of growing desperation as each new strategy fails against Spanish technological and tactical superiority. The most heartbreaking messages are those from Atahualpa himself, dictated to scribes who translate his words into the complex knot language of the Quipu. These communications reveal a man watching his empire dissolve around him while he sits powerless to intervene. He speaks of gold gathered with tears, of temples stripped bare to satisfy Spanish greed, of a people who no longer understand what their emperor expects of them now that the cosmic order has been overturned. In one particularly poignant message that you carry across 3 provinces, Atahualpa attempts to explain to his regional governors why he cannot simply order the Spanish destroyed, as he might command the elimination of any other threat. His words, preserved in knots that required an entire team of Quipucamayok to encode properly, speak of weapons that kill instantly across vast distances, of creatures that seem part human and part beast, of men whose skin color suggests they have never been properly blessed by Inti, yet who demonstrate power that seems to exceed even divine authority. The messages grow shorter and more cryptic as the months pass. Atahualpa's communications become increasingly focused on immediate survival. Instructions for gathering more gold, desperate attempts to buy time through compliance with Spanish demands, increasingly frantic appeals for loyalty from governors who face the impossible choice between serving an imprisoned god-emperor or accommodating the foreign invaders who now control their homeland. Your final message from Atahualpa arrives on a morning when the mountain peaks seem sharper than usual against the sky, their snow-covered summits gleaming with an intensity that hurts to contemplate directly. The quipu feels almost alive in your hands, its knots pulsing with an energy that seems to transcend their physical substance. This message is different from all the others, shorter, more direct, carrying an undertone of finality that makes your hands tremble as you prepare for your run. The message, when decoded at its destination, reveals Atahualpa's growing awareness that compliance will not save him. The Spanish have collected their ransom, room filled with gold and silver beyond the dreams of European avarice, yet they show no signs of releasing their imperial prisoner. Instead, they speak of trials and judgments, of crimes against their foreign god, of punishments that will satisfy their peculiar concept of justice. The emperor, who once commanded the absolute loyalty of 12 million subjects, now pleads for understanding from governors who face their own impossible choices in an empire that no longer functions according to any recognizable logic. As you run through landscapes that seem unchanged by the cosmic catastrophe unfolding around them, you begin to understand that you are witnessing the end of your world. The messages you carry are becoming historical documents even as you transport them, final communications from an empire that is dying, even as its administrative systems continue to function with mechanical precision. The roads you run will outlast the civilization that built them, carrying Spanish horses instead of Inca runners, serving colonial administrators rather than indigenous governors. The last message you carry from the imprisoned emperor is the shortest and most terrible of all. Decoded, it consists of only a few simple statements. He has tried to satisfy Spanish demands. He has gathered gold beyond measure. He has complied with every requirement his captors have imposed, yet he senses that his fate was decided long before his capture, that the Spanish never intended to honor their promises, that his death will serve purposes he cannot comprehend. On July 26, 1533, you are running toward a tambo in the southern highlands, when a sound reaches you across the vast distances of the Andes. A sound unlike any you have heard before, yet one that speaks immediately to your soul. It is the sound of an empire dying, the collective wail of thousands of voices raised in grief so profound that it seems to shake the very mountains. You stop running for the first time in your career, standing motionless on the ancient road as the sound washes over you like a physical force. Later, you will learn that this was the moment of Atahualpa's execution, when the last Sapa Inca died by Spanish garrote in the plaza of Cajamarca. But in this moment, you know only that something fundamental has ended, that the world you have served so faithfully has ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. The messages you carry will continue to flow along the ancient roads for a few more months, but they will be the death rattles of a civilization, final spasms of an administrative system that no longer serves any living purpose. Your legs carry you onward, driven by habits too deep to abandon, even in the face of cosmic catastrophe. But with each step, You understand more clearly that you are no longer a messenger of empire. You are an archaeologist, carrying the final artifacts of a world that has already passed into history. The quipu, bouncing against your back, contains information that will never reach its intended destination, orders that will never be carried out, questions that will never receive answers. As the sun sets behind the peaks that have watched over these roads for centuries, you find yourself thinking about the strange circularity of your situation. You began as a runner, carrying messages that bound an empire together through the power of human endurance. Now you end as a runner, carrying messages that document that empire's dissolution, your own endurance outlasting the civilization that created your profession. The rhythm of your breathing, the steady impact of your feet against stone, the familiar weight of the quipu against your back. These physical constants remain unchanged, even as everything else dissolves into chaos and uncertainty. In this moment, you embody the persistence of human effort in the face of historical inevitability, the dignity of service that continues even after its purpose has been destroyed. Tonight, as you settle into sleep in a tambo that may be abandoned tomorrow, you dream not of running but of stillness. In your dreams, the ancient roads empty of traffic, the tambos fall silent, and the complex language of the quipu fades into incomprehension as the last quipu kamayok who can read their messages dies without passing on his knowledge. But for now, you are still here, still carrying messages across impossible terrain, still serving an empire that exists now only in the momentum of its own administrative systems. Your breath creates small clouds in the thin mountain air. Your heartbeat provides a steady rhythm that connects you to the living world. And somewhere in the distance, other runners continue their eternal journeys along roads that will soon know only silence. The empire is ending, but you are still running, carrying its final words toward destinations that may no longer exist to receive them. Imagine yourself standing in a climate-controlled archive deep beneath the earth, where the dry air whispers secrets that have remained locked away for 5 centuries. Before you, displayed in cases lined with museum-quality lighting, lie dozens of quipu, those enigmatic assemblages of knotted cords that once carried the thoughts and knowledge of an empire. The silence here is profound, broken only by the gentle hum of environmental controls that maintain the precise conditions necessary to preserve these fragile witnesses to a lost civilization. You are no longer the running messenger of our previous journeys, but rather a scholar standing at the threshold of one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The quipu before you seem deceptively simple. Collections of colored cords hanging from a primary cord, their surfaces decorated with knots that vary in size, position, and complexity. Yet within these humble materials lies encoded information that once governed the lives of 12 million people across terrain that spans the length of a continent. The quest to understand quipu represents one of the most tantalizing puzzles in the study of pre-Columbian civilizations. Unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform of Mesopotamia, which have yielded their secrets to generations of dedicated scholars, the language of the quipu remains largely opaque, offering only glimpses of its meaning like sunlight filtering through heavy clouds. Each quipu you examine represents a locked vault of knowledge, containing information that could revolutionize our understanding of Inca civilization if only we possess the key to decode its contents. The colors of the cords themselves tell stories that we are only beginning to understand. Deep reds that might represent the blood of sacrificial llamas or the sacred color of the ruling dynasty. Golden yellows that could symbolize maize harvests or the divine radiance of Inti, the sun god. Blues ranging from the pale shade of high-altitude sky to the deep indigo of mountain shadows at twilight. Each hue was chosen with deliberate intention, part of a chromatic vocabulary that expressed concepts as precisely as any written word. Modern analysis has revealed that these colors were not arbitrary choices, but represented a sophisticated understanding of dye chemistry that rivaled anything available to contemporary European civilizations. The Inca developed techniques for creating color-fast dyes from sources as varied as cochineal insects for brilliant reds, indigo plants for deep blues, and various mineral compounds for earth tones that have retained their vibrancy across 5 centuries. The very durability of these colors suggests that the information they encoded was intended to last, that the Quipucamayok who created them viewed their work as contributions to an eternal archive of human knowledge. The knots themselves follow patterns that seem to dance at the edge of comprehension. Some are simple overhand knots, clustered together in groups that clearly represent numerical values following a decimal system remarkably similar to our own. These numerical quipu have been partially decoded, revealing sophisticated mathematical records that tracked everything from population censuses to astronomical observations. The Inca, despite lacking what we would recognize as written language, maintained statistical records with a precision that would not be matched in Europe until the development of modern bureaucratic systems centuries later. But beyond these numerical records lie quipu, whose purpose remains tantalizingly unclear. Complex arrangements of knots that seem too elaborate for simple counting, color patterns that shift and change along the length of individual chords in ways that suggest narrative rather than mere data recording. These mysterious quipu hint at the possibility that the knotted chords served not just as accounting tools, but as a complete system of information storage, capable of preserving everything from historical chronicles to religious ceremonies, from legal codes to epic poetry. Recent archaeological discoveries along the ancient Inca roads have added new dimensions to our understanding of quipu complexity. In 2003, archaeologists working at a site called Caral, located along the central coast of Peru, uncovered quipu that predate the Inca Empire by thousands of years. These ancient examples suggest that the technology of knotted cord record keeping represents one of humanity's oldest information storage systems, developing in parallel with the earliest writing systems of the Middle East and China. The discovery at Caral transformed scholarly understanding of quipu from a specifically Inca innovation to a broader Andean tradition that spans millennia. The implications are staggering. If quipu represent a form of writing that developed independently in the Americas, then the entire narrative of human literacy development must be reconsidered. The chords and knots that seem so primitive compared to alphabetic writing may actually represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to externalize memory, to create permanent records that could outlast individual human lives. Archaeological work along the Inca road system has revealed evidence of quipu production and use that extends far beyond the simple administrative functions previously assumed. Excavations at Tambo sites have uncovered specialized workshops where master Quipucamayok created their knotted records, complete with tools for measuring cord lengths, devices for maintaining consistent knot tensions, and dye vats for creating the specific colors required for different types of information. These workshops tell stories of extraordinary specialization and standardization. Analysis of quipu fragments found at different sites along the road network reveals that the system was remarkably consistent across the entire empire. A numerical quipu created in the northern provinces follows exactly the same conventions as one produced in the southern highlands, suggesting a level of standardization that required extensive training programs and quality control measures. The Quipucamayok were not simply local record keepers, but members of a professional class whose training was as rigorous and systematic as that of any modern technical specialist. The physical construction of quipu reveals technological sophistication that challenges assumptions about pre-Columbian American capabilities. The cords themselves were created using techniques that produced material of remarkable strength and durability. Cotton fibers were spun using methods that created thread stronger than anything produced in contemporary Europe, while wool from vicuñas and alpacas was processed using techniques that maximized both strength and color retention. The knots were tied with mathematical precision that required specialized tools and extensive training. Modern attempts to recreate authentic quipu using traditional methods have revealed that creating even simple numerical records requires skills that take months to develop and years to master. The complex narrative quipu that may contain historical or literary information would have demanded expertise comparable to that of medieval European scribes, representing years of specialized education and constant practice. Recent advances in digital analysis have opened new avenues for quipu research that were impossible using traditional archaeological methods. High-resolution photography combined with computer analysis has revealed subtle variations in knot construction, cord twisting, and color application that may represent additional layers of information in coding. Some researchers theorize that the direction of knot twisting, the specific angle at which cords hang from the primary cord, and even the texture of individual fibers may carry meaning that supplements the more obvious information contained in knot patterns and color schemes. Three-dimensional scanning technology has allowed researchers to create precise digital models of quipu that can be analyzed without risking damage to the fragile originals. These digital models reveal construction details invisible to casual observation, variations in cord thickness that may indicate different types of information, patterns in knot spacing that suggest organizational principles, and structural features that may represent a form of error checking or authentication system designed to prevent information corruption during transmission and storage. The application of statistical analysis to large databases of digitized quipu has begun to reveal patterns that may represent the grammatical structures of a genuine writing system. Computer algorithms designed to identify recurring patterns in the arrangement of knots and colors have discovered relationships that seem too complex and consistent to represent mere numerical data. These patterns suggest that quipu may contain syntactic structures, arrangements of informational elements that follow rules analogous to the grammar of spoken languages. One of the most intriguing recent discoveries involves quipu found in association with other information storage systems. At several archaeological sites, researchers have found quipu buried alongside collections of painted beans, arrangements of carved wooden objects, and textiles with complex geometric patterns. These assemblages suggest that the Inca may have used multiple complementary systems for information storage, with quipu serving as one component of a multimedia approach to record keeping that rivals the complexity of any modern information management system. The geographic distribution of surviving quipu provides insights into the functioning of the Inca communication network that complement the historical accounts we explored in our previous journey. Quipu found at high-altitude sites show construction features adapted to extreme environmental conditions, tighter knot structures that resist loosening in constant wind, color schemes that remain visible in the intense ultraviolet radiation of high altitude, and cord materials selected for their resistance to the freeze-thaw cycles that characterize mountain climates. Coastal quipu reveal different adaptations, with construction techniques designed to resist the humidity and salt air of maritime environments. The cords used in these lowland examples often incorporate different fiber types and processing methods, while the color schemes emphasize dyes that remain stable in the presence of oceanic moisture. These environmental adaptations suggest that the quipu system was not a single monolithic technology, but rather a flexible framework that could be customized for local conditions while maintaining empire-wide compatibility. The mystery deepens when we consider the accounts of early Spanish chroniclers who described Quipucamayok as being able to read their knotted records with the same fluency that European scholars read manuscript texts. These accounts suggest that experienced practitioners could extract complex narrative information from quipu, recounting historical events, reciting legal precedents, and even performing what might be described as literature. If these descriptions are accurate, then quipu represent a form of writing fundamentally different from alphabetic systems, a three-dimensional, tactile form of information storage that encoded meaning through spatial relationships rather than visual symbols. Modern experiments in quipu construction have revealed the extraordinary memory skills required to master this technology. Creating a complex quipu requires the maker to hold in mind not only the specific information being encoded, but also the various conventions for representing different types of data, the color symbolism appropriate to the subject matter, and the structural requirements that will allow the finished product to be decoded accurately by other practitioners. The cognitive demands are comparable to those faced by medieval monks creating illuminated manuscripts, requiring years of training and constant practice to achieve true proficiency. The tools used in quipu construction, recovered from archaeological contexts along the road system, reveal additional layers of technological sophistication. Specialized knot-tying devices allowed precise control over knot size and tension, while measuring instruments ensured that cord lengths followed standardized proportions. Color charts, created using actual dyed cord samples, provided references for maintaining consistency across different production sessions and different geographic locations. Perhaps most intriguingly, some archaeological sites have yielded what appear to be quipu dictionaries, collections of sample knots and color combinations accompanied by small objects or images that may have served as memory aids for students learning the system. These educational materials suggest that quipu literacy required formal instruction programs that were as structured and comprehensive as any modern educational curriculum. The process of creating a major administrative quipu based on archaeological evidence and experimental reconstruction would have required weeks of intensive labor by teams of specialist craftsmen. The primary cord alone might contain hundreds of subsidiary cords, each carefully measured, dyed, and attached at precisely the correct position. The knotting process would then proceed according to strict protocols that ensured information integrity while allowing for the complex cross-referencing systems that made large-scale administration possible. As you stand among these silent archives, surrounded by the accumulated mysteries of a lost civilization, you begin to appreciate the magnitude of what has been lost. Each quipu represents not just a collection of data, but a unique perspective on reality, a way of organizing and understanding the world that developed independently of European intellectual traditions. The knots and colors before you encoded not just administrative information, but entire worldviews, complete systems of knowledge that might have rivaled anything produced by their contemporary civilizations in other parts of the world. The silence of the archive becomes profound as you contemplate the implications of what surrounds you. Somewhere in these knotted cords lie the lost histories of the Inca Empire, the names of forgotten heroes, the details of military campaigns that shaped the destiny of continents, the recorded wisdom of philosophers whose thoughts were preserved in twisted fibers rather than written words, the scientific observations of Inca astronomers, the mathematical insights of their engineers, the artistic theories of their craftsmen. All of this knowledge waits in silent suspension, locked away in a code that may never yield its secrets. Yet the mystery itself has become part of the quipu's enduring fascination. In a world where digital information can be copied infinitely and transmitted instantaneously, there is something profoundly moving about these physical objects that embodied knowledge in their very substance. Each knot was tied by human hands, each color was chosen through human decision-making, each arrangement reflects the thought processes of individual minds, grappling with the challenge of preserving human knowledge for future generations. The rhythm of your breathing in the controlled silence of the archive becomes a meditation on the nature of communication itself. These quipu represent humanity's endless drive to share information across time and space, to create permanent records that outlast individual memory, to build bridges of understanding between minds separated by vast distances and centuries of time. In their silent complexity, they remind us that the desire to communicate, to preserve knowledge, to reach across the void of time toward future generations represents one of our species' most fundamental characteristics. As you prepare to leave this repository of mysteries, the quipu seem to shimmer slightly in their controlled lighting, their knotted surfaces catching and reflecting photons that reveal nothing of the secrets they contain. They wait with infinite patience for the breakthrough that will finally unlock their meaning, for the scholar who will discover the key that transforms these collections of cord and knot into readable texts that speak across the centuries with voices as clear as any manuscript or inscription. Until that day, they remain what they have always been, monuments to human ingenuity, testimonies to the universal desire to preserve knowledge, and puzzles that continue to challenge our understanding of what it means to write, to read, and to remember across the vast expanses of time that separate civilization from civilization, generation from generation, mind from mind. The morning sun crests the peaks surrounding the sacred valley, its first rays striking the golden walls of Coricancha, the temple of the sun, and transforming the entire city of Cusco into a landscape that seems carved from precious metal. You are no longer the exhausted messenger or the contemplative scholar of our previous journeys, but rather a privileged observer granted impossible access to the most sacred spaces of the Inca Empire, walking through palaces where every surface gleams with the captured radiance of Inti himself. Imagine yourself moving through corridors where the very walls breathe with wealth beyond European comprehension. The surfaces around you are not merely decorated with gold, they are sheathed in it, covered with sheets of hammered precious metal, so pure that they seem to glow within a light. Your footsteps echo softly on floors inlaid with patterns of gold and silver that represent the cosmic order itself. Geometric designs that mirror the movement of celestial bodies and the sacred relationships between earth and sky, between mortal realm and divine infinity. The palace complex of the Sapa Inca stretches before you like a golden city within a city, its buildings arranged according to principles that reflect both practical administration and spiritual cosmology. Each structure serves multiple purposes: administrative center, religious shrine, royal residence, and cosmic symbol, all simultaneously. The architecture itself embodies the Inca understanding of divine kingship, where the emperor's physical surroundings must reflect his supernatural status as the earthly incarnation of the sun god. In the private chambers of the royal family, you witness luxury that defies the imagination of even the wealthiest European nobles of the same period. The Sapa Inca sleeps on beds carved from single blocks of precious hardwood, their surfaces inlaid with patterns of gold that tell the stories of his divine lineage. The bedding consists of vicuña wool so fine that it feels like captured cloud, woven by master craftsmen whose techniques were guarded secrets passed down through generations of royal artisans. The royal wardrobe represents an accumulation of wealth that spans continents. Tunics woven entirely from threads of beaten gold, so fine that they drape like cloth, yet gleam like captured sunlight. Feathered cloaks created from the plumage of thousands of tropical birds, each feather selected for its perfect color and condition, arranged in patterns that represent mythological scenes and astronomical observations. Jewelry crafted from emeralds the size of small fruits, worn casually as everyday ornaments by individuals whose divine status makes earthly wealth seem almost trivial. The daily routine of Inca royalty unfolds according to rhythms that mirror the cosmic order they claim to represent. The Sapa Inca rises before dawn, not because duty compels him, but because his divine nature requires him to greet his celestial father, Inti, at the moment of sunrise. His morning ablutions are performed using water carried from sacred springs high in the mountains, heated in golden vessels and scented with rare herbs that grow only in the most inaccessible reaches of the empire. Breakfast for the divine emperor consists of delicacies gathered from across the known world. Fresh fish carried by relay runners from the coast, arriving still glistening with seawater after a journey of hundreds of miles. Fruits from the cloud forests of the eastern slopes, their flavors unknown to any palate outside the royal household. Maize prepared in dozens of different ways, each preparation representing a different region of the empire, and served in vessels of gold that are used once and then discarded, for nothing that has touched the lips of divinity can be used by lesser mortals. The logistics required to maintain this level of luxury reveal the true scale of Inca imperial power. Thousands of workers labor continuously to support the lifestyle of a single royal family, their efforts coordinated through the same administrative systems that govern armies and manage provincial tribute. Master craftsmen spend years creating individual garments that will be worn once and then preserved as sacred relics. Agricultural specialists develop new varieties of crops specifically to satisfy royal preferences, while miners work deadly shifts to extract the precious metals that adorn every surface of the imperial palaces. The royal court functions as a microcosm of the empire itself, with elaborate hierarchies that reflect both practical administration and spiritual significance. The Sapa Inca's immediate family occupies positions of theoretical equality with their divine patriarch, but even they must observe protocols that emphasize his supreme status. No one may look directly at the emperor's face without permission. No one may speak in his presence unless specifically invited to do so. Even his closest relatives must approach his throne with offerings that acknowledge his divine nature. The secondary nobility, regional governors, military commanders, high priests, and master craftsmen occupy positions in the court hierarchy that reflect their contributions to imperial glory. These individuals enjoy luxury that would make them wealthy beyond measure in any other civilization, yet their wealth pales beside the concentrated magnificence that surrounds the divine emperor. Their palaces, though magnificent, use silver, where the royal residence uses gold, fine wool, where the emperor wears vicuña, precious stones where he displays the rarest gems found anywhere in the empire. The contrast between this divine luxury and the lives of common citizens creates a social stratification more extreme than anything known in contemporary European societies. While royal children play with toys carved from jade and obsidian, peasant families struggle to provide their offspring with basic nutrition. While the imperial court dines on delicacies transported from across the empire, ordinary citizens subsist on simple diets of potatoes, maize, and occasional portions of llama meat. Yet this inequality is not seen as injustice, but as cosmic necessity. The Inca worldview holds that social hierarchy reflects divine order, that the extreme luxury of the royal family serves spiritual purposes that benefit the entire empire. The gold that adorns palace walls is not mere decoration, but sacred substance that maintains the connection between earth and heaven. The elaborate rituals of court life are not empty ceremony, but essential activities that preserve the cosmic balance upon which all life depends. The religious obligations of royalty require constant participation in ceremonies that are as exhausting as they are magnificent. The Sapa Inca must officiate at rituals that mark every significant transition in the agricultural calendar, every important astronomical event, every milestone in the imperial administrative cycle. These ceremonies often last for days, requiring the emperor to maintain perfect composure while wearing regalia that weighs hundreds of pounds and costs more than most Europeans will see in their lifetimes. The Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, represents the pinnacle of royal ceremonial obligation. During this celebration, the entire imperial court gathers in the great plaza of Cusco to participate in rituals that reenact the creation of the world and renew the divine covenant between the Inca dynasty and the sun god. The emperor appears before his subjects wearing regalia that transforms him into a living representation of Inti himself, his golden ornaments catching and reflecting sunlight until he seems to blaze with celestial fire. The preparation for such ceremonies requires months of intensive effort by hundreds of craftsmen and servants. New regalia must be created for each major celebration, since garments worn during sacred rituals cannot be used for secular purposes. The goldsmiths who create royal ornaments work in workshops that are themselves sacred spaces, their forges blessed by priests and their tools consecrated through elaborate purification rituals. The private life of the royal family unfolds within spaces that blur the boundaries between residence and temple, between home and cosmic center. The imperial children grow up surrounded by luxury so extreme that they develop no conception of material want. Yet their education focuses obsessively on the spiritual responsibilities that accompany their divine status. They learn to read the movements of celestial bodies, to understand the complex relationships between different aspects of the natural world, to master the intricate protocols that govern interaction with divine forces. The royal wives, chosen for their beauty, intelligence, and spiritual purity, occupy positions that combine elements of queenship, priestesshood, and sacred concubinage. They live in palaces that rival the emperor's own residence, surrounded by servants whose sole responsibility is attending to their needs and desires, yet their lives are as constrained as they are luxurious, bound by religious obligations and ceremonial requirements that leave little room for personal autonomy. The education of royal children requires the services of master teachers gathered from across the empire. Astronomers from the coastal observatories share their knowledge of celestial mechanics. Military engineers demonstrate the construction techniques that create roads and fortifications. Master craftsmen reveal the secrets of working with precious metals and rare textiles. These educational programs are as rigorous as they are exclusive, designed to prepare future rulers for responsibilities that encompass every aspect of imperial administration. The Royal Library, if such a term can be applied to Inca information storage systems, consists of thousands of quipu that record everything from genealogical information to astronomical observations to the complex mythological narratives that justify imperial authority. The Quipucamayok who maintain these records occupy positions of extraordinary trust and responsibility, for they are the custodians of knowledge that legitimizes the entire political and religious system of the empire. The medical care available to royal family members represents the pinnacle of Inca healing knowledge. Palace physicians have access to medications derived from plants gathered throughout the empire's diverse ecological zones, from the coastal deserts to the high mountain valleys to the tropical forests beyond the eastern slopes. These healers combine sophisticated understanding of human anatomy with spiritual practices that treat illness as a manifestation of cosmic imbalance rather than merely physical malfunction. The royal diet, beyond its obvious luxury, serves ceremonial and spiritual purposes that transform eating into a form of religious observance. Each meal is prepared according to strict protocols that ensure spiritual as well as nutritional purity. The vessels used for royal dining are blessed before each use and destroyed afterward, while the leftover food is burned in sacred fires that carry the essence of the meal to the realm of the ancestors. Even the royal bath represents an elaborate ceremony that combines physical cleansing with spiritual purification. The water, carried from sacred springs, is heated to precise temperatures and scented with herbs that possess ceremonial significance. The bathing chamber itself is decorated with mosaics that tell the stories of royal ancestors, while the floor consists of polished stones that represent the sacred geography of the empire. The contrast between this divine luxury and the harsh realities of maintaining the empire creates profound contradictions that are carefully managed through religious ideology. The same administrative system that ensures fresh fish reaches the royal table also coordinates the brutal labor drafts that maintain the road system. The wealth that creates palace magnificence derives from tribute extracted from populations that live at subsistence levels. Yet this extraction is presented as religious obligation rather than economic exploitation. The royal court's relationship with the broader population is mediated through elaborate public ceremonies that display imperial magnificence while reinforcing social hierarchies. During major festivals, common citizens are permitted to observe royal rituals from carefully controlled distances, witnessing luxury that emphasizes their own humble status while inspiring awe that supports imperial authority. These displays serve as both entertainment and political theater, demonstrating the emperor's divine nature through material splendor that seems to transcend earthly limitations. As evening approaches and the golden walls of Cusco begin to reflect the setting sun, the royal court prepares for nighttime rituals that mirror the morning ceremonies dedicated to Inti. The transition from day to night requires elaborate observances that ensure cosmic continuity, ceremonies that transform the simple passage of time into sacred drama that reaffirms the emperor's role as mediator between earthly and divine realms. The royal sleeping chambers are prepared with the same attention to spiritual significance that characterizes every aspect of imperial life. The beds are aligned according to astronomical principles. The bedding is blessed by priests who specialize in dream interpretation, and the very air is purified through the burning of incense that creates aromatic clouds believed to facilitate communication with the realm of the ancestors. In the deepest hours of the night, when the palace complex settles into relative quiet, the true isolation of divine kingship becomes apparent. The Sapa Inca, surrounded by luxury beyond imagining yet separated from normal human contact by the requirements of his divine status, experiences a loneliness that no amount of material wealth can address. His every need is anticipated and fulfilled by devoted servants, yet he can never experience the simple human connections that provide meaning and comfort to his subjects. The dreams of divine royalty, when they come, are interpreted as prophetic visions that carry implications for the entire empire. Specialists in dream analysis study every detail of the emperor's nocturnal experiences, searching for omens that might guide imperial policy or warn of approaching dangers. Even sleep becomes a form of public service, another aspect of the sacred responsibilities that transform every moment of royal existence into an act of cosmic significance. As you drift towards sleep yourself, imagine the rhythm of life in these golden palaces where luxury and isolation intertwine in patterns as complex as the quipu records that document imperial administration. The steady breathing of the sleeping emperor, surrounded by walls that gleam with captured sunlight, provides a counterpoint to the distant sounds of the city beyond the palace walls. A city where common citizens dream their own dreams, perhaps of the golden magnificence they glimpsed during public ceremonies, perhaps of simpler pleasures that their divine ruler, for all his wealth, can never know. The night settles over Cusco, like a blanket woven from darkness and starlight, covering equally the golden palaces of the gods and the humble dwellings of their subjects, creating a temporary equality in the realm of sleep, where even emperors must surrender their consciousness to forces beyond their control. As our journey through the Inca Empire draws to its close, allow your breathing to deepen and your mind to settle into the quiet rhythms that carry you towards sleep. We have traveled together along roads that witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, through lives that embodied both the magnificent achievements and the profound costs of human ambition. The ancient pathways we have explored continue to wind through the Andes, their stone surfaces worn smooth by centuries of feet, both human and animal. Their destinations long forgotten, yet their presence still marking the landscape like scars of memory across the face of time. The Chasqui messengers we followed on their impossible runs have been silent for 500 years, yet their endurance echoes in every modern understanding of human potential pushed beyond reasonable limits. Their lungs no longer burn with the thin air of the Altiplano, their hearts no longer hammer against ribs strained by superhuman effort, their feet no longer pound against stone roads that stretched beyond the horizon. Yet something of their spirit persists in the very roads they traveled, in the tambos that sheltered them, in the mountains that witnessed their dedication to duty even unto death. The messages they carried, those intricate quipu that spoke in the language of knots and colors, have outlasted the empire they served, surviving in museum collections and research archives where scholars continue their patient attempts to unlock secrets that may never yield to modern understanding. Perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps some knowledge is meant to remain mysterious. Some voices are meant to speak only to those who shared the cultural context that gave them meaning. The silence of the quipu may be more eloquent than any translation could ever be, reminding us that entire worlds of human experience can vanish so completely that only fragments remain, tantalizing glimpses of complexity that challenge our assumptions about what it means to be civilized, to be literate, to be human. The golden palaces of Cusco have been stripped of their treasures, their precious metal melted down to feed European hunger for wealth that could be counted and weighed and shipped across oceans. Yet the stones remain, fitted together with such precision that centuries of earthquakes have barely disturbed their perfect joints. The walls that once reflected the glory of divine emperors now stand as monuments to a different kind of permanence, the endurance of human craftsmanship, the persistence of excellence that outlasts the political systems that created it. In the contrast between the exhausted messenger and the divine emperor, between the humble quipu and the golden palace walls, we glimpse something essential about the nature of empire itself. Every great civilization has been built upon this fundamental inequality. The many who serve and the few who rule, the expendable bodies that maintain the system, and the irreplaceable symbols who justify its existence. The Inca Empire, for all its achievements in engineering and administration, was no exception to this pattern that has characterized human societies from the earliest agricultural communities to the most complex modern states. Yet there was beauty in this inequality, a terrible and undeniable beauty that complicates any simple moral judgment. The roads that broke the bodies of countless workers also connected communities separated by impossible terrain, enabling trade and communication that enriched millions of lives. The tribute system that extracted wealth from peasant communities also created the magnificent temples and palaces that represented the highest achievements of human artistry. The rigid hierarchy that trapped individuals in predetermined social roles also provided stability and security that allowed complex civilization to flourish in one of the world's most challenging environments. The Spanish conquest that ended this system brought its own forms of inequality, its own costs in human suffering, its own contradictions between magnificent achievement and brutal exploitation. The destruction of Inca civilization was not the replacement of tyranny with freedom, but rather the substitution of one form of imperial control for another. The gold that once adorned temple walls found its way to European palaces, while the indigenous populations that had served Inca nobles found themselves serving Spanish masters whose demands were often harsher and whose understanding of local conditions was far more limited. The roads themselves survived the conquest, serving Spanish colonial administration much as they had served Inca imperial control. The tambos were converted to serve new purposes. The communication networks were adapted to carry different kinds of messages. The very infrastructure that had embodied indigenous achievement was repurposed to serve foreign masters. This continuity suggests something profound about the relationship between human ambition and the physical environment. That the basic challenges of governing large territories across difficult terrain remain constant regardless of the cultural identity of those who attempt to meet them. As you settle deeper into the approach to sleep, allow yourself to imagine the persistence of human effort across the vast expanses of historical time. The Inca Empire lasted less than a century in its final form, yet the energy invested in its creation and maintenance represents the accumulated labor of millions of individuals whose names have been forgotten, but whose efforts shaped the world we inherit. Every stone in every road, every thread in every quipu, every golden ornament in every palace represents human time transformed into permanent achievement, individual mortality transcended through collective accomplishment. The Chasqui who ran themselves to exhaustion in service to an empire they could never fully comprehend were participating in something larger than their individual understanding, contributing to a system of human organization that achieved marvels even as it demanded sacrifices that seem incomprehensible to modern sensibilities. Their willingness to push their bodies beyond sustainable limits, to risk death for the sake of message delivery, to subordinate personal welfare to imperial necessity, reflects aspects of human nature that persist in different forms across all historical periods. In our comfortable modern beds, surrounded by technologies that make communication instantaneous and global, we may find it difficult to comprehend the devotion that drove young men to run until their hearts burst in service to information systems we can barely decipher. Yet something in their dedication speaks to universal human needs, the desire to serve purposes greater than individual survival, the willingness to sacrifice immediate comfort for long-term achievement, the capacity to find meaning in tasks that test the limits of human endurance. The divine emperors who lived in golden splendor while their subjects struggled with the basic challenges of survival embodied contradictions that characterize all forms of concentrated power. Their luxury was both magnificent and grotesque, their isolation both enviable and pitiable, their authority both awesome and ultimately fragile. The contrast between their godlike status and their human mortality became apparent only when Spanish steel proved more powerful than divine pretensions, when technological superiority overturned cosmological certainties that had seemed as permanent as the mountains themselves. The mystery of the quipu continues to tantalize scholars and dreamers, representing knowledge systems that may have been as sophisticated as any developed by human civilization, yet remain largely inaccessible to modern understanding. These knotted records remind us that literacy can take forms we have barely begun to imagine, that information storage and retrieval systems can be embedded in materials and methods that challenge our assumptions about the relationship between technology and intelligence. Perhaps the most profound lesson of our journey through the Inca Empire lies not in any specific historical facts we have discovered, but in the recognition of human complexity that transcends cultural boundaries and historical periods. The capacity for both magnificent achievement and terrible cruelty, the simultaneous presence of wisdom and ignorance, the coexistence of individual dignity and systemic oppression. These contradictions that characterized Inca civilization continue to characterize our own societies in different forms and configurations. The roads still wind through the mountains, carrying modern travelers who may pause occasionally to contemplate the vanished civilization that created these pathways. The stones remain perfectly fitted, testament to engineering skills that modern technology has difficulty matching. The silence of the abandoned tambos speaks more eloquently than any written history about the impermanence of human institutions and the persistence of human ambition. As sleep approaches, let the rhythm of your breathing match the steady pace of the ancient messengers. Let your heartbeat echo the drums that once called workers to their daily labor. Let your dreams carry you along paths that connect the present moment to depths of historical time that stretch beyond individual memory into the collective unconscious of our species. The Inca Empire has been gone for 5 centuries, yet something of its spirit endures in the landscape it transformed, in the genetic heritage of its people. In the persistent human drive to create systems of organization complex enough to coordinate the efforts of millions while meaningful enough to inspire individuals to transcend their personal limitations in service to collective achievement. Rest now knowing that the ancient roads continue their patient journey through landscapes that remember everything and forgive nothing, carrying the dreams of the past toward futures we cannot imagine. Connecting human hearts across vast expanses of space and time through the simple but profound recognition that we are all travelers. On pathways we did not create, servants of purposes we may never fully understand, participants in the endless human experiment of learning to live together on this magnificent and challenging planet we share. The mountains watch over your sleep as they watched over the sleep of emperors and messengers alike, indifferent to human ambition, yet somehow eternal witnesses to the brief, bright flame of consciousness that illuminates the darkness for a few precious moments before flickering out and being replaced by new flames, new dreams, new roads stretching endlessly toward horizons that recede even as they beckon us forward into the mystery of tomorrow. Sleep well, traveler. The roads are waiting, and there are always new messages to carry, new distances to cover, new connections to make between hearts that beat with the same rhythms across all the centuries that separate us from those who came before, and all the centuries that will separate us from those who are yet to come.